So one of the ministries of SAFTU's way of getting into the workforce, to the working class, to the workers, during this period when workers seem to be unable to hold gatherings, mass gatherings, because of the precautions related to COVID-19. After me, there will be a comrade will be delivering a subject on UIF. By the way, I'm Patrick Mkhize, the General Secretary of THORN, which is one of the affiliates of SAFTU. The arrival of a coronavirus in South Africa caught everybody unprepared, even the government and employers, let alone the workers, as up until now there are still those amongst the working class who say coronavirus does not exist. For their information, corona, which is also known as COVID-19, does exist, and it has killed hundreds of thousands of people worldwide. There is no vaccine yet for this virus, which is why we rely on taking safety precautionary measures, which include, but not limited to, keeping social distance, sanitization, frequently washing your hands with soap, wearing of masks, scanning, etc. On the 27th March 2020, when a level 5 national lockdown started, nobody was prepared for what was coming. Even those who imposed the lockdown surprised themselves, as they were so inconsistent in many aspects. Sectors that were never part of the essential service, as we knew it in terms by LRA definition, were declared essential service for the convenience of a lockdown. These sectors were not ready to operate under lockdown and had to improvise. Not all of them did a good job in that regard, I must say. You walked into a retailer and found workers without PPE, which is why wholesalers and retailers are amongst the sectors that experience their highest COVID-19 infections rates, and some have been closed as a result of infection and later reopened. It is the vulnerable and lowest paid workers that have been infected and who stand the risk of dying, as the infection and death numbers are now rapidly growing. We are in a capitalist country where profits are regarded as more important than the people. Hence a call by the bourgeoisie and capitalist class to end the lockdown. And now when the infection and death numbers are rapidly increasing and vaccine not yet on site anytime soon. Inkomo izofele jogin. Of course, we know that the DA and the Freedom Front Plus are taking the government to court in order to end the lockdown. And these two right-wing parties have got their own agendas to fulfill. On the International Workers' Day, which is 1st of May 2020, the capitalist regime of the ANC relaxed the lockdown regulations by moving to level 4, allowing other sectors of the economy to return to work, thus increasing numbers of workers facing the life-threatening infection daily, as employers only care about profits and not workers. Returning to work, the regulations stipulate that there must be a workplace plan before workers return to work. Government notice number 479, dated 29 April 2020, and issued by Mr. T.W. Mkhize, the Minister of Employment and Labour, stated this regulation. If you take note, the regulation was issued on the 29th of April 2020, which was 2 days before the effective date, which is 1st of May, which means that by the time workers were supposed to return to work, most employers had no workplace plan, and some had not even read the amended regulations. The sectors that were permitted to return to work on the 1st of May 2020 were the agriculture, hunting, forestry and fishing, electricity, gas and water supply, manufacturing, construction and related services, wholesale and retail trade covering stores, spaza shops, commerce and informal traders, information and communication services, media and entertainment services, financial business and business services, accommodation and food services for quarantine and essential service only, but restaurants not open and are only allowed food deliveries. The mining and quarrying, repair and related emergency services permitted, private household employment, public administration, government services and other arms of the state, health, social and personal services, education services on a date to be declared by the Minister of Education. As you can see, 17 sectors were permitted to resume duty on the 1st of May 2020 on a very short notice. When workers return to work, the employers are expected to strictly abide by the provisions of the Occupational Health and Safety Act, number 85 of 1993, as amended from time to time. We know for a fact that the employers always cut corners when it comes to matters of health and safety in the workplace and are not keen to provide workers with personal protective equipment. In many years, employers in the contract cleaning industry, construction, and wholesale retailers have either not been providing workers with PPE or they've opted for cost saving by providing workers with inadequate PPE. Now that there is COVID-19, where scanners, sanitizers, masks, gloves, etc. have to be acquired, many employers are not going to comply. In line with the World Health Organization, employers are supposed to implement basic measures for individuals to follow in order to reduce the risk of contracting COVID-19. These include frequent washing of hands with recommended sanitizer or soap, correct coughing and sneezing techniques, and avoid contact with sick individuals or those suspected to be infected with COVID-19. Levels of exposure risks are categorized into 4. That is, very high exposure risk, high exposure risk, medium exposure risk, and low exposure risk. Very high exposure risk, these are workers at very high exposure risk jobs or suspected sources of COVID-19 during specific medical, post-mortem, or laboratory procedures, and it includes 1. Health care workers, healthcare laboratory personnel, and mortuary workers. A high exposure risk is healthcare delivery and support staff, medical transport workers moving known and suspected COVID-19 patients, and mortuary workers preparing for cremation or burial of bodies. There is high exposure risk. Medium exposure risk is those with close contact with people who may be infected but unknown. It seems like all of us fall under the medium. And those who may have frequent contact with travelers who may be returning from international locations. Lower exposure risk. Those with minimal occupational contact with public and co-workers. Basically, more than 90% of the working class is between very high exposure risk and medium exposure risk, yet very little is done to protect workers. With the relaxation of the restrictions and the lockdown, workers are being sent back to the slaughterhouse and are being sacrificed at the altar of profit maximization, especially now that they have to choose between hunger and death, which is like choosing between the rock and the hard place. Healthcare workers have to stage a protest at their workplace in demand of better protection from the infectious disease, as they are not being provided with the adequate PPEs. Before the arrival of the dreaded COVID-19, mortuary workers had been struggling with horrific working conditions and being paid poverty wages, especially in government mortuaries. Their conditions of service are drastically deteriorating now that there is COVID-19. The regulations stipulate that on returning to work, there must be one, safe working environment. Workers can refuse to work if it is not safe, but we know that when they do refuse to work under unsafe conditions, they will be dismissed. We know that many workers will require many workplaces will require a lot of upgrade because of to become a safe place, because the employers are unwilling to spend money to upgrade the workplaces. To force employers to provide a safe working environment, workers and their unions will have to report unsafe workplaces to the Department of Labor, which continues to fail workers on many aspects, especially with regards to occupational health and safety matters. We are told that in the entire country, there are only 170 available labor inspectors, and the employers know this. Hence, they violate Section 8.1 of the Occupational Health and Safety Act number 85 of 1993, which reads, "Every employer," I quote, "shall have and maintain as far as reasonable, practicable, a working environment that is safe and without risk to the health of the employees." Some labor inspectors are accused of accepting bribes from the employers that they are supposed to investigate. Scanning of workers and report for duty on daily basis. On report for duty is another requirement. The purpose of scanning is to check the premature temperature of the employees who report for duty so that those with a high temperature can be tested for COVID-19. Many employers will be tempted to send workers with high temperature for testing when chasing production targets. Yet each and every workplace should have self-quarantine rooms where those workers with high temperature or suspected to have COVID-19 will be placed before being transferred to where they will get professional medical attention. Sanitization of workers and the workplace is another requirement. As it is, there are many companies without health and safety representatives, especially where there are unionized workers. So there will be no one making sure that all safety precautions are followed. Another requirement is that there must be social or physical distancing of 1.5 meters apart, and where necessary, erect physical barriers to make sure that there is this social distancing. This also is already a big nightmare in a labor-intensive business, as the lesser the number of workers in production line, the lesser the production, and capitalists are finding a way of bending this requirement. When the country goes to level 3 in most labor-intensive companies, the social distancing rule would be thrown out of the window. The other requirement is provision of personal protective equipment to each employee, which includes 2 cloth masks and gloves. Provision of paper towels is another requirement for workers to wipe hands, as fabric towels are not permitted. Another requirement is the training of workers how to use personal protective equipment. For employers, training is regarded as an avoidable expense and time-consuming, especially if it is to benefit workers rather than production. Therefore, for this reason, proper training will remain a wish instead of being accomplished. As I said, inkomo izofela ejogeni. Application of disinfectants in all areas and toilets, door handles, common areas, and shared equipment is another requirement. This should have been a way of life in the workplaces long before the arrival of COVID-19, but it has not, because of cost involved, which employers avoid, and there is doubt that it is going to be done now that COVID-19 is with us. Section 82B of the Occupational Health and Safety Act, number 85 of 1993, stipulates that without derogating from the generality of any employer's duties under subsection 1, the matters to which those duties refer include, in particular, taking such steps as may be reasonably practicable to eliminate or mitigate any hazard or potential hazard to safety or health of employees before resorting to personal protective equipment. As it is, members of Young Nurses Indaba Trade Union and NUPSO, which are SAFTU affiliates, are protesting against unsafe working environment, yet these nurses are taking care of our lives and the infected. The other requirements is the assurance that the workplace is sufficiently ventilated, naturally or mechanically. The mining, manufacturing, and textile clothing sectors are the biggest culprits in depriving workers sufficient ventilation. You find workers sweating during production time and cannot wait for meal intervals to get outside and get fresh air. And I have no doubt in my mind that this is not going to change anytime soon until a successful prosecution is secured to make an example. Chinese clothing and textile factory owners are the main culprits, followed by your BEE employers. Employers must inform employees that if they have COVID-19 symptoms, they must not be at work and grant them paid sick leave. The employer must appoint the manager from within existing structures to address the concerns of employees and the workplace representatives. They must minimize the number of workers in the workplace at any time through shift or working arrangements to achieve social distancing. The employer must provide employees with information concerning COVID-19 and how to prevent its transmission. They must report any diagnosis of COVID-19 at work and how to prevent the transmission. They must report any diagnosis of COVID-19 at work to the Department of Health and Department of Employment and Labor. Investigate the cause and take appropriate measures. It is a contravention of the regulations not to do so by the employer. They must support any contact tracing measures initiated by Department of Health. Remember, the symptoms of COVID-19 are cough, sore throat, redness of eyes, shortness of breath, difficulty in breathing, body aches, loss of smell and loss of taste, nausea, vomiting, fatigue, weakness, or tiredness. Immediately from the employer, if you experience any of these, inform the employer if you experience these symptoms while at work. Not doing so is contravention of the Occupational Health and Safety Act. More importantly, the worker puts themselves and their co-workers at risk if they don't report. If you have these symptoms, you must be placed in isolation and arrangements made for your safe transport to medical examination or self-isolation. Shops and other workplaces to which public have access must screen all persons entering the workplaces for symptoms. Workers who recover from COVID-19 may return to work after medical evaluation and subject to ongoing monitoring in line with the instructions of the Department of Health. Job loss bloodbath, which is a difficult one, a painful one. Many workers tend to lose their jobs as the country moves towards level 3 regulations. And by the time we get to level 1, millions of jobs will be lost. We are moving towards a massive job loss bloodbath, as many employers have served workers, unions and workers, with Section 189 notices of retrenchment. And the main reason for this is alleged by the employers to be loss of profit during a lockdown. Notwithstanding opposing theories as to whether lockdown is a solution or not to flatten the curve of the coronavirus, we know that the virus kills, as so many thousands of people have died in the world over. Therefore, the massive job loss that unions and workers have to contend with seem to be a vindictive act by capitalists to serve as a punishment for workers having complied with measures aimed at protecting themselves. COVID-19 has only exacerbated hostility that long been existing between capital and labor, as employers have always been complaining about the economic decline whenever workers make demand to better their compensation for their sweat and blood. Though they are not saying what should have been done instead of lockdown, capital is definitely blaming the lockdown in most Section 1893 notices, and some employers not regulated as essential service defied the regulations and continued to operate, putting the lives of workers at risk, just to prove how cheap are the lives of the black workers. While the death rate and levels of infections are increasing, massive workers will be losing their jobs. So, as we are talking about returning to work, there are those who are going to be joining millions of unemployed. Consultation with employers when retrenching workers does not stop retrenchment. It doesn't stop it completely, but it attempts to minimize or reduce the number of the workers affected by the retrenchment. So retrenchment continues anyway. This is our main challenge as SAFTU during and after lockdown. We need to up our game in fighting the scourge of unemployment, inequality, and poverty by fighting for an alternative economic system that puts people before profits. The current economic system is not working for the majority of our people, especially the working class, so it will have to be changed, and we will have to change it. What we are experiencing right now is a decaying system of capitalism, as it is notorious of being self-destructive. And during its metamorphosis, the casualties are always the poor and the working class. SAFTU and all organizations of the working class need to urgently develop a fight-back strategy. Otherwise, capitalists will continue to get away with murder. They, as a class, succeeded in destroying the environment, caused the global warming and climate change. Through their greed, destroyed the natural resources, and now they are destroying the lives of a class, the working class, which has sacrificed its entire existence for them to thrive and to strive. Down with capitalism. Down. Viva socialism. Viva. Stay safe. Thank you. Amandla.